Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 141. Raven is a monster. Northern's assumption was reasonable, but it had a significant flaw. It made perfect sense that the Luingard Empire was benefiting from the disaster, which was why they were allowing it to continue. However, what troubled Raven was, what could they possibly gain from monsters ravaging their continent? Luingard was a prosperous nation with abundant resources, a minimal population, formidable knights, and an unparalleled level of sea trade. Although the current state of affairs was unknown, Raven had initially thought that Luingard had locked their gates because they were too afraid to confront the destruction, likely a decision made by a cowardly emperor. But after hearing Northern's perspective, she began to reconsider her stance. Perhaps they do have something to gain from the disaster after all. But what could it be? Raven remained pensive for a few moments before her silvery voice cut through the silence. We do not have time for political games. Our arrival here was forced upon us. Ironically, we don't even know why we're here. Our parents likely believe we're at the academy, unaware of Ruffsberg's deception. Every student here shares the same grudge and anger towards him. Upheaving the agendas of some empire is not what we should be doing. She paused, adding, that is, even if there is any agenda at all. Northern nodded. I'm glad you see it that way. Then you should also understand that, for now, all our resources and manpower should be focused on finding a way back home. However, Gilbert wants you all to challenge and close the rifts. That is the only way for these people to survive, Raven asserted, her expression resolute. Northern stared at her frantically, his expression almost trembling. What do you mean, the only way for these people to survive? Do you think you're in a position to determine what's best for them? It's a luxury to care for these people while we're in such a dire situation ourselves. Raven met his gaze, raising her chin slightly. What's happened has happened. We can endure it and not only survive but change every aspect that affects us. It doesn't always have to be about us. We can restore the lives of these people if we fight together with them. We are stronger together. That's just a stupid ideology. It's stupid. It's stupid. It's stupid. Northern glared into her eyes, azure flames burning ferociously within them. Then a frown creased his forehead as realization dawned. You're buying into Gilbert's stupid idea? Do you all want to be heroes so badly? It was my idea, she replied to Northern, her expression unwavering, not even in the slightest. Northern's brows rose, then furrowed a second later. I see. I see. For some reason, he didn't find it hard to believe. This lady standing before him seemed like a walking disaster, and he only realized it the moment she claimed the idiotic plan of heroism was her idea from the start. His head lowered for a few seconds, then he raised it to meet hers once more. Lunatics. You are all lunatics. The frown on his face became tense and heavy with stress. You can, for God's sake, return home. Even if you can close all 5 rifts, won't you eventually have to ask Luingard's ship to leave? We will. Then why? Why are you guys so hell-bent on helping these people? It's not even helping, it's pushing them to their death. Because if you wanted to help them, you'd be looking for a way to transport them to the central plane. Instead you are caring for things like, can they feel at home? He pointed at them with a deep scowl etched on his face. These people are suffering. They live every day, unsure of when their end might come. You could remove them from this predicament. This is just land. They could adapt to whatever they find in the central plane. But you insist on pushing them toward their deaths. Your plan will claim so many lives. It would be worth it, Raven stated, her tone firm. A terrified expression froze on Northern's face, his mouth slightly agape. This girl is a monster. He let out a heavy sigh and smiled bitterly. There's no convincing you, either. It's fine. As I've told Gilbert, you can do whatever you want. I have no care for it. I'll do my own thing. He waved at her and turned to leave. Before he could move, her voice echoed into his ears. I'll hire you. Northern turned around, his brows furrowed. What? Her gaze was more resolute than ever. I'll hire you as a mercenary. I need you to accompany me and Terence to a place. Silence ensued between them for a few beats. Then Northern's voice severed the taut tension. I don't find this pleasing. Are you playing with me? Raven shook her head. No. He took 2 steps closer, glaring at her, his face barely 2 breaths away from hers. Then what are you doing? You think I'll accept if you involve money? Oh, I see. He retracted his head and nodded sadly at her. You must be one of those damned kids who come from rich clans and think they can solve everything with money and by calling out the name of their clan. Raven frowned. When did I ever call out the name of my clan? You didn't need to. He cast a distasteful look on her. I'm not interested in whatever price you have to offer me. I'm not interested in associating myself with any of you. He turned away, but her voice stopped him once more. Even if it's an airship? His legs froze as he was about to take his next step. Slowly, he turned back to face her. An airship? Yes. It's an item, to be exact. You won't need to go to the Lewingard Empire, and I can give it to you so you can go home. Of course, after you help me. Northern's countenance crumpled horribly. Insane. This girl is insane. Chapter 142. Avarice should be renamed to Northern. It made no sense to Northern. It was absolute lunacy. If he had a way to go out of the rift all while he was in it, he would have grabbed onto that way and stepped out of that place with immediate effect. There was a thin line between cowardice and common sense, but it didn't matter in the face of survival. He needed to live, maybe to come back and fight another day, maybe to get stronger another way. As cowardly as running away sounded, Northern believed it was common sense and reasonable. Confronting something when your doom was certain sounded even more cowardly, plus stupid. If she had an airship, not only could she avoid whatever horrors might be in the sea, she didn't need to go to Lewingard. It'll be a safe ride back home. So why? Why is she not using it, and why is she willing to give it up for me? Northern narrowed his eyes in suspicion, then scoffed. All right, so you want me to believe you have an airship, which, by the way, would make your journey back to the Central Plain a cakewalk. Not only are you not using it to go back, but you also want to leave it for me. Raven shook her head, hair swaying gently along. No, you are wrong. Then, Northern tilted his head. Would you care to explain? I don't have the ship yet. A frown creased upon Northern's brows, eyes crinkling beneath them. I don't get it. So you were planning to bargain with a ship you don't have yet. He didn't know whether to call her stupid or insane. Or she's just plain dumb maybe. But Northern knew there was nothing dumb about the girl standing before him. How old could she even be, 16? He wondered, however, discarded the thought a second later. What's the use of such useless thoughts? Raven started. The ship. I could get it any time I want. But I decided not to in order to keep it a secret. Of course, you have to. Knowing there is a way home will tear up the order in the little kingdom you guys have managed to build for yourselves. Northern's brow suddenly flinched. Then he focused his gaze more on Raven. Accompany you to where? Raven did not hesitate. She spoke as though she was expecting Northern to ask all the while. There exists a cohort put together by the Prince of Lothellowen. They tried challenging the rift, and I think they forgot something. Her explanation only made Northern's curiosity grow worse. Maybe that was what she was trying to do. Northern stared at her. His eyes were peeled dull and tired. Definitely, she wouldn't want to reveal all her information, but the fact here is that there is an airship. It changes everything so far. I could go back home. The thought of home filled Northern's mind with delight and expectations. At the same time, it was scary because he felt like he was having a wild dream, one that was bound to go up in flames. He clenched his fist tightly behind his back, staring at the ground for a couple of seconds before bringing his eyes back to Raven. So this airship is supposed to be where? The location where we are headed, she responded firmly. The deal was so enticing. He would really be able to return home. He didn't care about anything. These guys were a lost cause anyway. He knew better than anyone the trouble that might be lurking in other rifts. And if Khal's other altar is waiting for them there, they were headed for damnation, and no amount of talk was going to save them from it. Besides, this might be my only chance to be close enough with that girl. I believe her name was Terence. This was the only chance he'd get. Terence and Raven. He wasn't sure what made Raven so exceptional from the rest, that even an ordinary man would recognize how exceptional she was from the rest of the party leaders. I'd love to have her ability too, so this could, in the end, work out to benefit him. But I can't just agree like that. I have to extort them. Northern folded his arms and remained pensive for a couple of seconds before opening his mouth. All right, but I have a condition. Raven raised a brow. What condition could that be? I already gave you the best deal. Yeah, sure you did. I know that too, but think about it. Northern started explaining with hand gestures. What if it all goes wrong? What then do I have to gain from this expenditure of yours? It can't fail, she initiated with a deep frown. If it had any chances of failure, then I wouldn't have asked you. Northern grinned at the corner of his lips. Oh? Contrary to that, I thought you were asking me to increase your chances of success, he added with a tone laced with taunt. Or are you onto some nonsense like trying to test me through this? Raven kept her silence throughout and stared at him, unflinching. Her crimson gaze at some point almost wiped the smugly expression off Northern's face. Instead, his brows furrowed, and he made clear to her. If I catch a whimsy wink of anything like trickery, death will be a better option than the hell that I will show you. Raven, at that point, allowed a small but confident smile. Of course, you have nothing to worry about. I'm as open with you as I need to be. Northern's expression froze, his blue eyes piercing into hers. Then he threw his face away and let out a titch of frustration. That smile on her face is so annoying. I can't help but feel like I'm playing myself into her hands. Raven's voice caused his focus to trail back to her face once again. So, what is your condition? Northern let out a sigh. Never have I been so stressed from just a few minutes of talking to someone. His conversation with Raven was almost like walking on eggshells. At some point, he felt like he was being tested by the things she said, and strangely, he found himself wanting to pass that test. Other times, he felt like the words that came out of his mouth were being evaluated and judged. It made goosebumps run helter-skelter his skin. The fact that it felt like he wanted to enter her good book, impress her in some way, was a very, very uncomfortable feeling. She's someone I should run away from. Northern was silent even after she had spoken. He just stared at her dubiously, his eyes glowing faintly. It's fine. It's just going to be this one time. I'll add 2 more talents to my repertoire, and if things go well, I'll have a certain way back home, and it will be a bonus also. I want all the soul cores we receive during this expenditure. Chapter 143, Ellis's Redemption, Part 1. I want all the soul cores we receive during this expenditure. Even after saying the words, Raven's expression remained indifferent and fearsomely cold. Northern's brows creased a little. Impressive. She didn't even flinch. In truth, Northern had intentionally mentioned an absurd price because he wanted her to refuse, and then there'd be no deal between the two of them. Her offers were tempting enough. There was no reason he should refuse them. But the fact that he couldn't get over the feeling of falling into a trap was bothering him. So if he might end up getting played, he needed to reap as many rewards from it as he needed to. Raven finally opened her mouth and spoke. I can give you all of mine, but I can't give you any of Terence's. Even when bargaining, her features were stoic and unshaking. Northern stared in absolute silence, then parted his lips in a little smirk and raised his chin. I'll have half of Terence's then. That or I'm out. Lines of frown slowly folded Raven's features. Seeing this, Northern couldn't help but spread his lips in a wide grin. He could see it as plain as day. He had hit her where it mattered. Terence, huh? Terence. If they were counting scores with their conversation, Raven had probably hit 100, and Northern just 1. But this 1 felt like 1,000. That expression on Raven's face, it outdid the former. This one was truly worthy of a trophy shelf. She looked heavily conflicted. What? You can't do that. Northern whined, an ear-to-ear grin adorning his face. Can I discuss this with her and get back to you? Northern gestured pompously with a smug grin. All right, I understand. Do what you have to. I believe you know where to find me when you make your decision. He waved and walked past her. Come on, Mr. Fluffy. Let's go home. He and the wolfish beast crossed over the barely standing bridge, leaving Raven at its other end. Northern spared her one more glance and saw that she was already leaving before facing his front finally. I guess that last one must have shaken her quite well. She didn't even hesitate about giving me all her soul cores. Northern was sure that it was an impossible deal because soul cores were the only way for drifters to get stronger. Except she's someone like me that doesn't need soul cores to get. Northern shook his head vigorously. Nah, that is impossible. Northern and Mr. Fluffy strolled forward, traversing the desolate and silent square of the capital city. There were a few monsters on their way, which Northern decided to avoid rather than engage. The reason being that Gilbert's men could be onto him again, and they might be someone more skilled at stealth. They reached the estate gate, and Northern was about to open it when a voice suddenly shot into the sky. Dark terror. Northern turned around with a gaping mouth. Wow, for his voice to reach here. He must have shouted the hell out of his throat. A smile settled on his lips. I wasn't even expecting him to take the chance. But since he did, I guess I should help him. Northern had definitely thought Ellis would overlook what he said and look for some other way to deal with his trouble. But now, rise, dark terror. From the black flames came a devil. Northern looked into the devil's burning eyes. How exactly do I pass this command? You know Ellis? Since you are with me all the time, even though you are in the limitless void, you should see him when I was talking to him. Dark terror glared into Northern's eyes, the red flames in its burning stronger than a second ago. I guess he gets it. If you get it, go after Ellis. Make sure you are unseen by anyone and save his ass. Northern commanded and turned but quickly turned back again. Stop, dark terror. The devil was already merging with its shadow before Northern's voice came. It stopped and rose out of it like black flames burning out of the ground. Northern stared hardly at the devil. Whatever you do, do not kill anyone. He watched as the devil's eyes gleamed again. Then it finally merged with the shadows and streaked away. I wonder if that's a skill. I didn't even check what kind of skill he has. If he has a profile like me. Northern turned around and opened the gate. I guess I should do that later. A couple of minutes ago. Bang! 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 A heavy knock shuttered the wooden door that parted Ellis's diminutive form from the hallway. 3 muscular guys could be seen standing in front of his door. Behind them was a robust guy with his head bowed and body fidgeting. Bang! 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 What the hell? Who's that crazy person? A voice shouted from inside the room, its echo a bit muffled. The muscular guys looked at each other with vicious grins. Then the one closer to the door raised his hand to bang the door with even more strength. However, the wooden door creaked open before he could bring his hand down. Ellis looked up, left and right, then his facial expression tore apart. He rushed to quickly dart back inside, but the man was faster, stopping the door with his strong arms before Ellis could slam it back. What do you think you're doing, bozo? Sir. Ellis responded with humility, shoulders trembling and eyes looking anywhere but their faces. I asked, what do you think you are doing? The man speaking was a dark-skinned, bald, and extremely muscular man with a small snake tattoo on the side of his face. Honestly, he looked like he could have crushed Ellis's wooden door with just a throw of his fist. Gunther. There's no use talking to him. The man on the left side of this said. Gunther spoke. He was a little less muscular than Gunther, light-skinned, and with a mohawk styled on his head. True. Gunther grabbed Ellis by his collar and effortlessly dragged him out, lifted him and threw him on his shoulder. Then they all walked down the hallway. Please, please, I have done nothing wrong. If you did nothing wrong, then shut up, Gunther retorted as they turned left, entering another hallway that ended in a long arched window. Ellis looked up. Damn it! These guys are taking me to the backyard. That damn place. There were places where hoodlums would select as their own, a base of some sort. The backyard was such a place. Ellis had never experienced what it felt like to be taken to the backyard. Up until now, he had always been a good boy. Darn it! If only I knew that he wasn't a prince from Lewingard. Ellis gritted his teeth as they neared the end of the hallway. The window. Move faster. The last one behind grunted, smacking the head of the robust guy. The more they came closer to the window, the more horror overwhelmed Ellis's mind. He's gonna get beaten. They're gonna shame him and beat him up, and worst-case scenario, there was a rumor that Gunther likes guys, and he forces his way with them. The feeling does not have to be mutual. Please, please let me go. I have done nothing wrong. Stay still. Gunther hushed powerfully. They reached the window and Gunther placed one leg, ready to jump through. At that moment, Ellis suddenly remembered Northern's words. Should anything happen, just scream dark terror regardless of where you are. Please, please. His thoughts beckoned for whatever form of salvation he could have. And as Gunther jumped through the window, Ellis's voice pierced into the air with all the throat-ickle power he could garner. Chapter 144. Ellis's Redemption, Part 2. Thud. Gunther landed powerfully, his sturdy legs causing the earth to tremble slightly beneath his commanding presence. Without a shred of gentleness, he carelessly discarded Ellis from his shoulders, the poor boy's back smashing against the unyielding ground. Ellis curled in on himself, writhing in the excruciating, bone-deep ache that instantly radiated through his entire being. Why the hell do you keep shouting? Are you mad? Gunther snarled, his grip like iron as he seized Ellis by the throat and slammed him against the wall, pinning him there. I ask, are you mad? Answer me. Are you mad?
No.
No, sir. Ellis's voice quavered, icy tendrils of fear freezing his blood, his face drained of color. I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm so dead. Damn it. I regret the day I met him. It had been a day like any other. Survival was an ever-increasing struggle around the stronghold. True, they had enough to fill their bellies, sustained by the rations of meat that parties brought back from their hunts and shared. But if a man remained complacent because he had food in his mouth, such a man was bound for damnation. In the end, being comfortable was an insidious assassin, while confronting one's doom head-on was a fair and honorable executioner. Both, ultimately, would kill you. You'd either die a brave soldier or perish a foolish man. Ellis didn't want to die a foolish man. He hailed from a minor baronet family, and as the firstborn child of his parents, he had worked his ass off to become the pride of the family. Even though they were nobles, they were still regarded as commoners, seen as a weak set of pedigreed dilettantes. When they attended social gatherings, they were looked on as stains and uncouth blemishes, cursed and talked down upon. Ellis yearned for them to eat their words, for them to kneel before his father and mother one day. He longed to elevate his family's standing by any means necessary. Hopefully, he'd graduate from the academy and become a national knight. If he earned enough merit, he could be granted the noble rank of a baron, or even a viscount. It was why he had worked his ass off and managed to pass the Academy's second chance exam for those who had failed once before. He had strived so hard to be here. What had befallen them was unfortunate. But now that everyone was moving on, he wasn't about to live in complacency because he possessed a combat-useless talent. Ellis craved to be better. He needed to be better. It was why, when that man came with his offer, Ellis saw it as a tremendous opportunity. Although he couldn't go into battle, he would still be able to gain soul cores and gradually grow stronger too. He'd finally reach the nomad rank and, hopefully, receive the title of a master one day. But it had been a trap. A lie. The soul cores had lasted only about a month, and after that they were being used and bullied. These thugs would force them to buy trivial items and demand that they sell them for soul-binding items, beating them until they handed over everything they had. And that man had never shown his face again. A few had tried to report the injustice, but the matter never saw the light of day. No one cared. This was a dog-eat-dog street. It was every man for himself. The party leaders were already preoccupied enough with ensuring the survival of the masses. It was only expected that they wouldn't bother themselves with trivial matters like this. There was no way out for them. "Are you deaf?" Gunther's voice, previously muffled, grew clearer as Ellis's vision slowly returned. "Answer me. Why did you leave your merchandise? Where are the items you got last week? You didn't submit them?" Ellis stared at Gunther's tanned face with a deadpan expression, blood streaming down a corner of his mouth. "The items last week? Oh, that." Perhaps it was because his back ached so fiercely, or because he was so utterly consumed by fear that he couldn't think coherently. Nothing suddenly seemed to matter anymore. These guys were probably going to make him wish he was dead. Rather than beg with tears, he would simply resign himself to his fate. What does it matter? They'll do what they want to me anyway. "Are you deaf?" Gunther shouted once more, pulling Ellis back and slamming his back against the wall again. The others watched in silence, arms folded. The robust boy fidgeted, trying to steal glances at Ellis's face. Ellis's eyes shifted toward him, and immediately the boy looked away. His face beaded with perspiration. "That bastard!" Ellis then refocused his gaze on Gunther as the man shouted again. "I said, where are the items?" Ellis's lips twisted into a nasty grin. His chin raised in a condescending gaze aimed squarely at Gunther. "Ah, that. I exchanged them for cores and got a little bit stronger." Not just Gunther, but every single being present in the backyard was shocked into stunned silence. Since these guys were the little gang that he had assembled to serve as his hands in this underhanded business dealings, no one dared disrespect them. Besides, they were members of his party. Gunther, in fact, was a team leader himself, which meant that he was stronger than your average drifter around here, probably 10 times stronger than Ellis. And yet, Gunther clenched his teeth visibly, his lips spreading into a wide, predatory grin. "You must have a death wish. Don't worry, I'll grant it to you." He clenched his hand so tightly that his veins swam in visible paths beneath the skin. Then he pulled back his arm, the very air seeming to seize as Gunther readied a mighty blow. Ellis frowned. "If I will die, I will die a strong man, not a foolish man," was the thought that echoed through his mind as Gunther's punch shot towards him. The blow folded into Ellis's face, smacking his head against the wall. He let out a guttural groan and collapsed to the ground, his ruined visage showered in cascades of blood pouring from his nose and mouth. Gunther looked down at him with contempt. "You can dare to speak again now, idiot. Fool." The other 2 lackeys behind Gunther guffawed at Ellis's prone form. "Guy, I thought he was even going to put up some fight. What the hell? Weak-ass bro doesn't even know where to stick his ass." Suddenly, the backyard plunged into an unsettling darkness, an eerie quiet descending upon them all. Everything had overturned in an instant, their hair rising as chills raced down their spines. Something was wrong. Gunther looked around, his gaze falling upon his trembling legs. What is wrong with me? Why am I being like this?" He moved a hand to wipe his brow.
"I'm sweating."
"What's making me sweat?" He turned to look at Ellis, who was writhing silently in pain. Surely it can't be this fool. That was when he noticed it. His brows furrowed deeply. A circular shadow was situated between Ellis and him. What? Has this always been there before? Gunther stared keenly into the shadow. Suddenly, for flaming eyes ignited within its depths. In that instant, every nerve in his body screamed only one primal command. Run. Chapter 145. Ellis's Redemption, Part 3. In the blink of an eye, Gunther leapt back, landing farther away than even those behind him. His hands trembled, his legs felt feeble, as though they might buckle at any moment. He could only stare in petrified horror as a flame of darkness slowly rose from the ground and coalesced into a human-like visage. Or was it human? At least that was how it appeared to them, until its form was completed. The entity stood on two legs, with 4 arms, a curling tail protruding from behind, for crimson eyes glowing with malicious cruelty, and 2 black horns twisted upwards from its head. The devil stood between them and Ellis, who quivered uncontrollably. He had tried to look up, only to lay eyes upon a monstrosity. That monstrosity caused the tendrils of fear to ensnare his entire being, making what he had felt moments before now seem like child's play. In the face of such terror, he couldn't even muster the courage to raise his head. Besides, the one moment he glimpsed the monster was enough to comprehend. Although no one knew, Ellis was special in his own way, and he had kept that very fact a secret, because his parents had instructed him to do so. There's no soul core, but it's registering as a hellion rank? Plus this air. I can sense its danger is devil level. What is a monster of this caliber searching for here? With just a glance, Ellis had activated his talent ability C. This talent allowed Ellis to peer into the soul of any monster, their rank and danger level information automatically imprinting itself in his mind. At his current level, it was impossible for him to discern their name. It also worked with drifters, although sometimes it proved useless against those above the drifter rank. It was impossible for him to peer into the souls of drifters stronger than himself. It also worked with items, although it had its own limitations. To put it simply, Ellis was a rare gem working diligently to conceal his existence. Several times he had tried to reveal the secret of his ability, but the warning his parents had sounded always echoed hauntingly in his mind. Ellis, until you find someone you can trust, never show anyone what you can do. Ellis had no idea why they insisted on it so adamantly, and now it didn't even matter anymore. He was probably going to perish in this place, slain by this monster, along with his tormentors. A satisfied grin spread across his face. At least they get to die too. Dark terror stood motionless for a couple of seconds, awaiting the humans' reaction. However, they all shook with fear, one of them round and robust, even soiling himself. The devil remained still, crimson eyes burning towards them with cold, menacing indifference. They all trembled in fear and slowly began to retreat. The gap between them and dark terror gradually widened. And when they reached the edge of the backyard, which branched into an open alley connecting to the front yard, the devil moved. Before any of them could react, its hand grabbed one's face and hurled him against the wall, shot forward like a flash of black light, grabbed another, pummeling his stomach with its lower hand. And as Gunther made a run for it, his leg a step away from reaching the alley, its tail snatched his ankle and flipped him over, smashing him onto the ground. It repeated the motion several times, mercilessly pounding the muscular man into the ground as though he were a weightless piece of wood. Then it stopped and slowly stepped forward, leaving webbed cracks in the ground from the previous wreckage with Gunther. It drew closer to Ellis, looking him in the eye with its menacing, flame-like gaze. The poor boy's entire body trembled as he became the object of its scrutiny. Ellis squeezed his eyes shut, awaiting whatever fate might befall him. Then, all of a sudden, the oppressive presence vanished. It was like a veil of dark clouds had been torn away from the atmosphere. Slowly, he raised his head. It's gone. There was no monster anymore. Everything had returned to the way it was. No, even better. The air was fresh and breathable, cool and strangely invigorating. He looked around. Ahead of him, 4 of them lay unconscious on the ground. 3 were the handiwork of the devil, and 1, well, he was lying in a puddle of his own urine. Just how much did he pee? Ellis pondered, casting him an irritated glance as he stepped over the body. He passed the rest and ran for his life. One thought rang in Ellis's mind as he dashed through the alley and emerged in the front yard. Dark terror. He didn't know why. but he had a gut feeling. That was what the strange white-haired boy had meant by saying he should shout dark terror. There was no other explanation. That had to be dark terror. If that was the case, then... Who the hell is this guy? Oh my world! Have I not gotten myself into bigger trouble? Northern lay lazily on his bed, the daylight star high in the sky, bathing the entire estate in a warm glow. His room, of course, was dark and somewhat neglected from this radiance, but some feeble rays managed to invade through the window, illuminating the center of the room. He lay with his hands behind his head and eyes closed, enjoying the warm temperature of the early afternoon. Gosh! It feels like it's been centuries since I've seen the day. I can't even remember the last time I've been sunbathed. Northern might have entertained the idea of going outside shirtless to bask in the warmth of the daylight star, but he wasn't in the mood. His conversation with Raven still left him with some unanswered questions. He kept pondering hard if he was making the right decision by accepting her offer. Also, what were the things he could do moving forward? How could he survive in this land? How could he grow stronger? While lost in thought, the strangest thing suddenly happened. Do you want to copy talent Soul Eyes, C-Class? For 100 talent fragments. Northern's eyes flew wide open. Yes. Sorry, you do not have enough talent fragments to copy the talent. I don't know what just happened. But crap. Chapter 146. Cleaning up Brimfield Forest, Part 1. Northern was still in a daze a couple of seconds after the transparent panel had vanished. What was that? There's definitely no one around me, and I didn't witness anyone. Suddenly he paused. It didn't take him long to realize the potential source. He frowned, suspicion creasing his brow. No, that can't be possible. I can copy talents even without being physically present? What Northern was suspecting was the fact that there was only one connection to him that extended outside. If someone had used a talent ability on Dark Terror, then it made sense. However, this realization was profoundly shocking. Could this have happened before, or was it a new capability he gained upon reaching the Drifter rank? Northern didn't know. I'm confused. But something nagged at him. He summoned his profile and scrutinized it intensively for a couple of seconds. Name, Northern Longguard. True name, nameless. Attributes, formless, spawn of void, limitless void, vestige of chaos and void. All eyes, chaos thread, flames of chaos. Soul rank, Drifter. Talent fragments, 0 out of 2000. Copied talents, 0/2. Own talents, 1. Attribute abilities, active/passive. September 10th. Owned items, Mortal Blade, Eternal Twilight, Silver Sword, Death Glare, and 24 others. My talents have stagnated since I returned from the rift. To be precise, it was only yesterday he woke up, according to Annette. He had been unconscious for about 5 days. So it didn't feel like a long time, and he wasn't pressured to start hunting for talent fragments immediately. Besides, he'd been preoccupied since awakening. But seeing he had no talent fragments when the opportunity to copy a talent arose filled him with disappointment. Crap. I should hunt for some talents then. I also want to experiment with how the talents function. Northern had been wondering about the number of talent fragments awarded for slaying monsters, whether the amounts were determined by ranks or danger levels. Or both. There were a couple of things he wanted to explore. But he needed a skill that could allow him to peer into the souls of monsters, see their soul cores, and if possible, their danger levels. He craved that ability desperately. Though it wasn't a combat skill, it was a necessity he longed to possess. He stood up, and immediately Mr. Fluffy, who had been slumbering in a corner, raised his head, ears perked like erections. The monstrous wolf watched with glittering eyes as shards of black sparks wove something around Northern's body. A couple of seconds later, Northern was donned in a lustrous black armor, with 2 horns protruding from his head. Are you interested? Let's cleanse the forest together, Northern said to the wolfish beast. At that moment, a shadow suddenly streaked into the room, and dark terror rose from it. He turned his eyes to gaze at the indifferent monster. "I'm sure you didn't kill anyone, right?" Dark terror stared impassively, the flames of its eyes burning more ferociously than calming a second later. "I wonder if that is some way of saying yes." Northern nodded and dismissed the devil, returning it to the embrace of the flames of void. Then he turned to Mr. Fluffy, who was snarling ferociously at the presence that had suddenly disappeared. Northern looked at the beast. "You're quite hostile, aren't you? Or was it because of Dark Terror's intimidating presence?" He patted the beast's head and took the bag that was sitting next to it. Northern summoned a clone and handed the bag to it. "All you have to do is harvest the cores of whatever monsters I slay." He commanded and headed out with that, flying through the window and landing on the ground in a wake of webbed cracks. Mr. Fluffy followed, touching down with a softer step and dashing forward, keeping pace right behind Northern. The afternoon was growing sharper and hotter, heat gradually accumulating inside the devilish armor, but Northern didn't feel bothered by it. "I wonder if it will become an issue later on." Despite the temperature, his body felt cooled, but it was still too early to draw any conclusions. Northern strode forward gallantly, observing his surroundings. After a couple of seconds of strolling, he came to a stop. There's a round for..." "No, 6. There was a minute flow of chaos that wove the core of every soul, and by following that flow, Northern could discern the number of presences around him. He opened his hand, materializing a black steel blade, and pushed his leg back, ready to spring into action. Hissing ghastly breath escaped his clenched teeth, and in a fleeting moment, Northern's figure streaked into the forest like black lightning. The first ox-like monster stood motionless, perhaps disoriented by the harsh sunlight. Northern didn't hesitate. In a single fluid motion, he swept past the creature, his blade slicing cleanly through its neck in a rolling motion. "You have slain hazardous beast, Bulfer. You have gained +3 talent fragments." Without pausing, Northern turned his attention to the next target. He could sense the presence of several more of the ox-like monsters nearby, their chaotic energies rippling through the forest. Gripping his black steel weapon tightly, Northern sprang forward, his feet barely touching the ground as he closed the distance. The next monster, alerted by the commotion, swung its massive head towards Northern, its jaws gaping wide. But Northern was quicker. He ducked under the creature's attack, his blade slicing upwards in a swift, arcing motion. The monster's jaw was severed, blood spraying in an arc as it roared in pain and confusion. "You have slain hazardous beast, Bulfer. You have gained 3 talent fragments. This is easy." Of course it was. Northern paused and skillfully twirled the onyx blade, transferring it from one hand to the other and facing the depth of the forest. Mr. Fluffy arrived behind him and growled slowly. The beast wasn't even given a chance to display his prowess. Northern smirked. "Don't worry, buddy. You two will shine very soon." A menacing grin split his face. "A horde of them is coming." Chapter 147. Cleaning Up Brimfield Estate, Part 2. Evil Somebody. Northern remained motionless for a couple of beats, then relinquished his grip on the mortal blade, allowing it to disintegrate into black sparks. He swung both arms forward in arcing motions, 2 daggers materializing as they whipped through the air. Then he crossed them before his body, clutching 2 sharp, crude-looking daggers that appeared ravenous for blood. The atmosphere seemed to thicken as Northern and Mr. Fluffy awaited the approaching horde of Bulfers. Their thunderous footfalls caused the very ground beneath Northern and Mr. Fluffy to tremble violently, as if an earthquake were imminent. Or perhaps it was one. Northern's fingers tightened around the hilts of both stilettos, his gaze locked on the oncoming horde. His azure eyes gleamed subtly as his eyeballs flitted swiftly from one target to the next as they advanced. Yash! In an instant, Northern had identified 6 initial monsters he would deal a death blow, and had already, with the aid of the unseeing eyes, devised the optimal point of death for each of them. The undeniable truth is, in his mind they were already deceased. He took off like a gale, shreds of flames cloaking him as he dashed across the distance in an instant, reaching his first target with the swiftness of a breeze. He twirled his dagger, burying it into the monster's torso. Gripping the other dagger, he swung his arm upward, cleaving the other side of the beast in a linear spray of black blood. Then, in a swift blur of motion, he spun and slit the monster's throat. His visage was indiscernible. He had already moved on to the next target. His dagger was a blur of wind as it pierced the brain of the monster, just below its horn. Northern flung the other dagger, nailing it away with a kick without even glancing at its trajectory. Now he had already seized the monster's horn. He wrenched out the stiletto, causing the unfortunate Bulfer to emit a guttural cry, almost like that of a failed berserker, if such a thing existed. With a clench of his hands on the monster's horn, it cracked, and a little more force would shatter it. But Northern seemed unconcerned. He yanked the monster toward him, snatched his dagger, and stabbed it repeatedly in the abdomen, as if he were a psychopathic serial killer performing his delicate operations. His strikes were frighteningly precise and calculated. Each one sank viciously into the wound, digging deeper with every swing of his arm. The Bulfer thrashed and shrieked, flailing its limbs futilely at Northern as he continued his relentless assault. Blood gushed viciously from the wound, spraying across Northern's armor, but he remained unflinching, his focus unwavering. Then he finally allowed the monster to embrace death, flowing like water into the grasp of the next one. His dagger pierced into its eyes, abandoning the stiletto. Northern pulled both hands back and exhaled a steamy breath. The moment seemed to slow down in extra effort to add tension to the scene. Then a ferocious and feral round of battering commenced. His hands were swift, uncatchable, lashing onto the chest of the monster with the speed of a striking cobra, delivering blow after blow with unrelenting force and maddening focus. The blinded and disoriented Bulfer thrashed wildly, throwing its muscular limbs in desperate attempts to make contact. But Northern was unrelentingly vicious, slamming his fists into the monster's torso with bone-shattering force. With a final blow, the monster was sent hurtling backward. A second later, Northern was upon its lifeless figure lying on the ground. He dislodged his dagger and stabbed it into the jaw of the monster right in front of him. Then he crudely wrenched the second dagger from the shoulder region of the same monster, tearing its tendons asunder. Northern launched himself into the air and delivered a 360-degree kick, sending it careening through the horde. He twirled both stilettos once more and hurled them like darts, then dashed forward, several shards of black light appearing on both his arms. With a silver sword in one hand and a ghostly fine blade in the other, Northern closed the distance and swung outward in cross arcs, inflicting crude lacerations on the bodies of both monsters. Then he released both swords, returning them to the embrace of his soul, grasped the taut arms of both monsters, and forcefully pulled them toward each other, smashing their frames together. He dislodged both daggers, shifted to one side, and rained battering slashes on one monster. Then, with a final swing across the neck, rendered the Bulfer voicelessly dying. He shifted sideways again and twirled the dagger in the air, just above his palm, caught it back, and shot it into the eyes of the other Bulfer, adding one more with his other hand. With both eyes blinded, the Bulfer lashed out with unbridled wildness and ferality. Looks like their reaction to blindness is all the same. A vicious grin caressed Northern's lips as he slowly moved his hand and touched the monster's head between its horns. Northern, from the moment the Bulfers were rushing towards him, had activated the unseeing eyes, which caused their movements to slow down before his gaze. If he wanted to, at that moment he could have dealt with all 6, even 10, if he so desired. But Liel, eyes of the unseeing, was an ability that granted an unnatural boost to his physical power, albeit for a limited duration. He could have ended it within that duration if he wished to. It would have been much swifter. But Northern voted against the idea. While it granted him an enhancement, he thought to keep that as a trump card, and witness how fast and far he could push himself. And more beautifully, Northern's awareness of the space around him grew more vivid with each use of his eyes and body. It was becoming a function of his entirety rather than solely of the eyes. It was a sweet sensation to be aware of his surroundings without having to directly look at them. It was insanely sweet. With ferocious glee ignited in the depths of his azure eyes, Northern uttered coldly, "Burn!" A ferocious black flame enveloped the beast, causing it to wail and dance erratically. Northern watched, chuckling as the monster stumbled backward, rolling into the others, and the flame caught onto another bulfer, and another. Before long, his environment was simmering with black flames. All this transpired in a mere 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Chapter 148, Narcissistic, Really? A Northern stood expressionlessly, watching the mayhem that its master wrought with a crude laughter plastered on his face. Up until now, it had been doing its work of diligently cutting apart the viscera of the slain monsters to harvest 3 beast cores each. But right now that task proved to be quite a daunting one. Regardless, the clone stood with no shred of expression on its face. It was like a statuesque version of Northern, only that this statue had more flesh than stone. Black flames eerily illuminated this area of the forest. Even Mr. Fluffy had to take a brief pause. As compared to before, from a small interloper to an enormous abhorrent harbinger of crude and unforgiving lacerations. Before its stalwart brown teeth and lightning speed, even the bulfers who are born predators now had no choice but to become prey. The white varmint transitioned between their muscle frames, in a wake of deep gashes and splattering black blood. However, even it was taken aback by the might of Northern's attack. The sinister flames that burned in the forest reflected in its widened blue eyes. And those eyes glimmered with adoration for the man that stood in between them. Laughing. Sweet. Really sweet. Northern looked around, awestruck. This is a work of art. Oh crap. Have I always had an artistic side to myself? Art was the one thing Northern had always sucked at. But I think I'm a very good artist in this world. An artist who can do amazing things with flames. Just look at this. He raised his head to the flutters of flames that didn't look like they'd chill anytime soon. A smug grin spread across his lips. I have to give it to you, Northern, you're good. He folded his arms and laughed for a couple more seconds. Alright, that is that about that. Let's see how much I gained. The system kept pouring in. He summoned the panel. Name, Northern Longguard. True name, nameless. Attributes, formless. Spawn of void. Limitless void. Vestige of chaos and void. All eyes. Chaos thread. Flames of chaos. Soul rank. Drifter. Talent fragments. 81/2000. Copied talents. 0/2. Own talents. 1. Attribute abilities. Active/passive. September 10th. Owned items. Mortal Blade. Eternal Twilight. Silver Sword. Death Glare, and 24 others. 81, that's fair. Since Beast rank gave 3 fragments, I guess I killed about 27. He looked around, dazed for a second. Wow. Maybe I underestimated what Black Flame could do. Augmentation. Black Flame proved itself to be flawless, just by using the flame to augment himself and his sword. An apex-level monster shuddered in fear. And just by attacking one monster, every other caught the flames and burned to their demise, dancing in unorganized choreography. It made Northern once again grin with a sinister glee. He clapped at himself. Alright, let's move for real. Time to move things to the next level. Northern grinned and continued forward. The clone was still way back, harvesting cores from crisply burned bodies. And Mr. Fluffy was right behind him, his eyes gleaming with a radiant glow of respect. Both of them marched forward for a while without encountering any forest. In fact, Northern would say they've pretty much explored the forest path that led straight to the gate, since they were now standing in front of the gate and couldn't find any more monsters. I'll be disappointed if that is the case really. He looked around. So, only about 27 beast rank monsters exist in this forest. And Instructor Annette said it's dangerous. He shook his head dejectedly and circled back. Even though his sensibility to life through chaos proved to be quite effective, at the same time it felt so fickle that Northern had concluded earlier that he shouldn't depend too much on it for perception. When it came to sensibility and perception, he doubted if anything could surpass the human senses being trained to their optimal state. With the overwhelming unlimitedness that being a drifter offered individuals, Northern knew or suspected that it was probably possible to hone his five senses so much that they'd function at a transcendent level. Of course, it was all speculations. Right now, he didn't know for sure. But I'm going to try all of my speculations. Everything. Even the fear of death would not stop this part of his adventure. No doubt he was all about survival, but that didn't mean he was going to stay complacent as an excuse for avoiding danger. My goal is to become so strong that survival becomes a cakewalk. Northern after a while had gotten back to where he burned a couple of monsters. The clone was still tearing out the cores. Mr. Fluffy, how about you join him? Remember that time we picked cores back in the rift? Woof. Mr. Fluffy seemed to remember just fine. He licked Northern, who giggled in response. Right, I know too. They were ironically good old days, and you were very small then. He looked at Mr. Fluffy, his spit rolling down his armor. Man, you sure grew up fast in 6 months, I guess. Northern smiled as he addressed the white varmint. Then their beautiful moment was suddenly interrupted by a loud guttural cry. "Day-er-er-kirktier." Ha! Northern raised a brow and looked around. As black birds fluttered off the forest, immediately the cry reverberated in it. What's this? What's going on? His brows creased into a frown. He turned to Mr. Fluffy and his clone. You guys stay here. I'll go check what exactly could be wrong. He shot forward like a loosed arrow, swiftly traveling through the forest, towards the mansion. But instead of going straight, he ran around the forest. If he was in the front of the mansion, where the voice had come from was the back. The mansion was situated in the middle of the forest. Northern, instead of running straight through, decided to run around the forest. It was an instantaneous decision for 2 reasons. First reason was that, even though he could tell where the voice had come from, it was vague. Maybe the distance was too far for him to read the flow of chaos that weaved the soul of that person, or the ability was not just accurate. Could be that not all souls are weaved by these strings of chaos. Second reason was he wanted to also see if he had missed any monsters. It was an opportunity to clean out the crumbs he could have missed. One cannot afford to overlook these things. Chapter 149. Poor Ellis. Swish! The mortal blade swung across the air, burying deep gashes onto the smooth skin of the monster that sprang out from corners of the woods. As I guessed, I missed some. Northern did suspect the fundamental problem to be distance, but trying to find something else that will work wouldn't be too bad now, would it? He came to an abrupt stop and stabbed his sword downward without looking. The corpse eater beneath him shrieked and eventually died. You have slain hazardous corpse eater. You have gained +2 talent fragments. Northern ignored the message. He was currently focused on something else. I wonder where the noise had come from. It was around this place. And funnily, Northern suspected who it could be. The notion was just quite unbelievable. There's no way he would have. Northern was standing in the thick of the forest that marked the back of the mansion, where he evaluated the voice should have hailed from. But there was no. A frown fell on his brows and he turned his gaze to the left, looking at a certain fat tree in particular. Come out now, or I'll make you. A breeze of silence blew past and, later, a sluggish step crawled out from behind the tree. A slender boy of 6 feet 1 inch revealed himself, head bowed and almost squirming. His hair was black, although it looked more brown than black. But when the disheveled appearance of it is taken into account, anyone would conclude that it's just the level of dirt his hair had packed. He was wearing makeshift armor that seemed to have been patched together from different kinds of woods. His breastplate, however, was a round metal. His pants were the same black pants he wore to the academy. His boots were now replaced by some sort of knee-length ones. I'm sorry. His voice trembled. Even after his words had fully registered in his mind, Northern still found it hard to digest. He just stood there, blinking. It's really him. He came. Northern was speechless for a couple of seconds. Those seconds passed in grave silence. The slender boy standing in front of a tree, Northern standing opposite him. Then finally, Northern's voice cut through the silence. "Are you insane? What are you doing here?" Ellis shivered even more the moment Northern's hoarse tone shot at him. His heart felt like it was shrinking. The entirety of Northern's form made his blood curl. There was something about the armor Northern was wearing that bore a striking similarity to the monster that had saved him. In fact, Ellis had undoubtedly thought that it was Dark Terror that was coming. He could sense the ominous presence as it came closer with inhuman speed, which was why he thought of hiding before it approached. But on seeing its visage, he saw blue streaks of light. He never saw blue with the monster, it was just the red flames in its eyes. Northern was giving off the same malicious aura that the monster had, although slightly inferior, but it was too similar to be overlooked. Ellis could tell in an instant that there was a very vivid connection between this monster and Northern. Most likely it had more to do with his talent and talent ability.
"I'm glad
I didn't make the wrong decision. Are you deaf?" I said. "What are you doing here?" Northern's voice shook him out of his thoughts. "I'm sorry. I'm very sorry," he apologized, bowing 90 degrees each time the word sorry made it out of his mouth. Then shakily, he straightened his back but still tried to keep his eyes from meeting with Northern's while stealing glances of him as he responded. There was no W. Where else I could go?" Northern arched a brow. "What do you mean? Calm down and speak to me." His tone simmered down a little. Strangely, the entire atmosphere seemed to ease up and Ellis suddenly found his words flowing out better. "The thing is, a strange monster came to save me when I screamed Dark Terror." "I know that." Northern's response was sharp and short. "But I am in more trouble." "How is that my business?" "You owe me one already for saving your ass." "Yes, but you said you were going to help me out of the situation." "I asked why I should, and I don't think I got a reasonable reply from you. Is there something you could give me?" Northern's gaze trailed up and down on him for a moment. Then his voice continued. "No, I don't think you have anything you can give to me." Northern began walking closer. "Or, you could give yourself. You could serve me?" A smirk curved his lips. Ellis immediately frowned and retorted sternly. "I'm not looking to get out of that slavery only to enter into another one." Of course. Northern paused and stood in front of him, silent. Suddenly, a panel appeared before Northern's eyes. "Do you want to copy talent Soul Eyes, C-Class, for 100 talent fragments?" "Sorry, you do not have enough talent fragments to copy the talent." Northern's eyes widened. "What? Wait, what just happened now?" Northern frowned and looked at Ellis. At that moment, Ellis's head suddenly jerked backward, causing him to stagger back. He managed not to fall, and as he was about to straighten his head, Northern appeared at his front and grabbed his neck. "You fool! What the hell do you think you're doing?" Ellis trembled as Northern clenched his throat and glared at him. He tried to struggle away from Northern's grip, but it was too strong. Besides, his left eye had gotten blurry, and a drop of blood was streaming down his cheek from his eye. Northern squinted his eyes. "He is the one. He is the owner of the ability." It suddenly made more sense. When Dark Terror saved him, it's possible that he had tried to take a peek at Dark Terror, and since Dark Terror was linked to Northern, he could copy the talent without having to be there directly. And now he is using it again. The name does sound fancy, but I am more curious what it is. I need to be very meticulous to be sure I'm not making a mistake. Northern looked at the poor boy, obedient and calmly fitted in his grip. For now, I should keep him around and find out more about his talent. Chapter 150. The Gem in Ellis, Part 1. Northern and Ellis stood silently against each other for a couple of seconds. Then Northern released his grip on the poor guy, looking down as he crumbled to his knees. What was that? What ability was that? Ellis' eyes widened instantly. He raised his head with trembling pupils. No way. He managed to see through my talent ability? Ellis' widened eyes transitioned onto a deep frown. Seeing this, Northern extended his hand, materializing a black stiletto. This can either go two ways for you. You speak, or you speak but with your teeth broken and deep wounds playing here and there around your skin. I'm not sure I will do it well, maybe I'll call Dark Terror to help me with that. He paused, stared intensely at Ellis and added slowly. You've met him before, right? Dark Terror. Ellis nodded his head vigorously in response, then he bowed his head and screamed, Please spare my life. Northern stood with one hand akimbo. The other was twirling the dagger playfully, its onyx blade sinisterly gleaming in the afternoon light. If you want me to spare your life, then we will have to take this slowly. I ask, you respond. He looked to his left and softly summoned. Dark Terror. A dark cloud of flames emerged and revealed the devil. Anytime I speak and this guy does not respond, move on to break his fingers in the most vicious way possible. Ellis trembled. His face paled and his thoughts became disoriented. He had thought of the possibility before. No, he sort of knew Northern was linked to the ominous creature called Dark Terror. But seeing it happen before his eyes caused thorns of fear to grip him all over his body. He was basically shivering as if he had caught a serious cold. Yes, that's just the amount of fear that I need. Northern smiled inwardly. Now, you'll start answering my questions. His voice came out coldly. What are you doing here? Shivering. Ellis responded. IIH, had no other choice, Titi. They are going to kill me. Northern was silent for about a dozen seconds, before pressing his inquiry. They who? Him and his gang. I know. I know you helped me, but it's only going to get worse from here. They're going to find me and beat me to a pulp. A slight frown folded upon Northern's brows as Ellis's words settled in. That's true. He had sent Dark Terror as a temporary solution to Ellis's problem. Now that he had interfered, there was bound to be a consequence of some sort. That consequence now was Northern's big cup of tea to drink, since it involved Dark Terror. It was also why Ellis could not stay back in the castle. This him will come straight for him and do whatever to have his answers. Still, to come to this place, did he not know it is filled with monsters? Northern discarded that thought immediately. Ellis had come through the back, which means he was well aware of monsters. And the fact that they were not too many in this region. That sense of awareness is amazing. Too amazing. Northern squinted his eyes and took one step closer to Ellis. Why did you pass the back of the estate? He inquired. Ellis fidgeted. He hesitated, but with the malicious devil standing behind Northern, he couldn't for long. It's my attribute. Northern's eyes widened. Your attribute? Ellis nodded timidly. Yes. Northern was silent for a while, with his eyes out of focus, as he processed a couple of things. He then looked at Ellis and opened his mouth. Let me get this straight. He said, You have an attribute that allows you to be able to perceive your surroundings? Ellis nodded timidly again. Explain. Northern's harsh tone rang out, inquiring sternly from him. Ellis was silent for a while, debating whether he should speak or not. Northern was in front of him. Dark Terror was in front of him too, looking eager to spring into action. Maybe any later than this the monster could even move. And he promised his parents not to reveal his talent. Mom, Dad, I'm very sorry. I have to think about saving my life first. He sighed and started. My talent is called Soul Eyes. Oh, I see. Northern was not surprised to hear the word, although he was quite happy to see that he was indeed correct. Now, he just needed to know the remaining information about the skill so he'd judge if he should copy it or not. Wait, is that it? Ellis asked, shocked at Northern's reaction. What else? Northern asked with a scowl. Immediately, Ellis looked away, almost squirming. It's nothing. Continue, Northern demanded harshly. With my talent being Soul Eyes, my talent ability is see and my attribute is sense. He paused, looked at Northern's face and continued. See allows me to appraise anything, human, items, monsters. I can see their talent abilities, although it doesn't work with their true names and attributes. I also can't see for anyone stronger than I am. Northern froze. Crap. It's amazing. This is it. This is what I've been searching for. He quickly recomposed himself and peeled his gaze on Ellis. So, just now you were trying to appraise me? Is that why you were bleeding in your eyes? Yes. Ellis nodded and slowly frowned. But something was different. He raised his head to Northern, who folded his arms in response. Listening. Usually, I don't just know it for other people. I've tried it on even Sage Gilbert before. It has never backfired on me. Which is why this is strange. You are a drifter rank. The recoil in my eyes felt like I was trying to peer into something more than myself. Something chaotic. Ellis' explanation was delicate. It could be seen from the intense expressions he weaved across his features as he explained, each time searching for the perfect word that would carry what he meant, hoping Northern best understood him. And Northern really did understand him, in fact, more than Ellis understood himself. I guess this is because of chaos and void. There was no other explanation, since Ellis said it looked like he was trying to peer into something bigger than himself. A small smile formed on Northern's lips. Does this mean I'd be shielded from uncomfortable scrutinizations like this in the future? Nah, I can't be sure. For now, I should focus on the ability in front of him. Being able to appraise everything is enough for me to copy it. It has everything I need. Everything. Chapter 151. The Gem in Ellis, Part 2. Sense allows me to be able to tell when someone is around me. On unusual occasions, I can also sense monsters. Interesting, quite interesting. Ellis raised his brows. I'm sorry, sir, but there's nothing interesting about this ability. All I can do is check out some information. It's not even useful battle-wise. And you think being able to check out some information is not cool enough? You could become a scout? I don't even understand. Why are you not a scout right now? Why are you not an integral part of the party leaders? Ellis shook his head somberly and looked away. Observing his features, Northern could guess. You didn't tell them? Ellis looked down. No, I didn't. Why? Ellis spent a couple of seconds in silence again. The hell? Why is he so reluctant? Northern looked at Dark Terror. Immediately the devil took a step closer. Wait.
I'm listening.
They'll only use me and discard. I don't know the details, but my parents were scouts like me. They warned me not to reveal my abilities under any circumstances. I'm just trying to follow their instructions. I see. He was voiceless for a second, then his voice rolled out again. Why did you now tell me? Ellis was dumbfounded. I told you? You threatened to torture me. Oh, did I? I see, I guess I did. Ellis' brows furrowed as he burrowed into Northern. What manner of creation is this person? Is he playing with me? Northern clapped, jacking Ellis out of his head. Okay then, no problem. Ellis, let me offer you a contract. Ellis raised his head to look at Northern's face. A contract? Yes. Northern smiled and moved closer to him. Then he crouched. I want to offer you a chance to save yourself. You accept this contract and Dark Terror will become your shadow. Practically. Ellis shivered and looked at the menacing devil standing like a statue. He then gulped and returned his eyes to Northern. Really? Northern nodded. Yes, really. What do I have to do in this contract? It's simple. I want to open a bazaar. Northern grabbed both Ellis's hands, helping him up as he too stood. A bazaar? Like a shop? Yes. Northern looked into his eyes with the ghost of a smile and added, for enlisting Dark Terror's protection and my help to pull this matter from its root, you'll be helping me sell some items. Ellis frowned and took a step back. I'm not going to repeat the same mistake. I'm also not forcing you to do anything. If you accept my proposal, you are not repeating any mistake. I'm not promising to give you any soul cores like they did. I need them too. And my precious items are going to be bound to your soul since you'll be selling them. Ellis's eyes widened. You trust me that much? Northern blinked for a couple of heartbeats. Then he exploded a loud burst of laughter, almost staggering back. As his laughter receded, He shot a glare at Ellis. Me? Trust you? Am I crazy? There is no level of insanity that would make me trust anyone. If you do anything to me, you will die. I said that dark terror would be your shadow. Why are you deaf to that part? Ellis licked his dry lips and responded to Northern, nodding his head diligently. Yes, sir, I understand. I can't do anything, sir. Of course, since you look like someone that loves his life so much, I'm sure you wouldn't want to lose it. Northern looked at him and scoffed. Yes, sir. Northern looked at him as he stood composed with his head bowed. This is good. This way I can keep him around. While Northern's plan was to use Ellis to sell the items he had, to gain some soul cores, he also wanted to make sure Ellis was around his side, so when he was ready to copy his skill, the poor guy would be accessible. Northern turned around. We can return to the mansion for now. We'll talk when we get there. He stopped and looked back over his shoulder. And remember to walk closely beside me the moment we enter that mansion. If you are behind by more than 2 steps, I can't guarantee your safety. My SES safety? Why? Why else? There's a monster inside the mansion. Northern dismissed with a wave and gestured with his hand. Let's go. Ellis shrank back immediately. Go? Go where? You said there's a monster there? Why are we still going? We should be going to where you stay. Northern let out a sigh and turned. Exactly. Which is why we are going to the mansion. You said there's a monster there now? I live there. The monster is the tenant. Northern paused for a moment and thought aloud. Or is it the landlord? I don't know, whichever way, we live together. Ellis' face grew pale. Beads of sweat were forming all over his timid features. What do you mean now? What are you saying? How can you be living with a monster? Well, this and that led to that and this, and now we both have to put up with each other. Don't worry, you won't be in the weird dynamic. I'll find a room for you somewhere and make Dark Terror guard you. Northern smiled politely. What? I'm going to be living there? Sure, why not? Do you plan to return to the castle where you'll be caught by your enemies? I don't even care, but my items will be in your possession. I don't want to hear excuses like you were forced. I'll just kill everyone in that castle. He thought about it and nodded. I guess that will be a better solution. They won't have to worry about going back home. Ellis's eyes widened. Are you that strong? Of course not, it was only a joke. Now let's go. Northern turned and began walking away. If you don't walk closer to me, I can't guarantee your safety in the forest too. Ah, yes, sir. Immediately, Ellis ran and caught up to him. Chapter 152. Cynical. Northern and Ellis were already upon the mansion, although they were coming from behind, so they had to make a turn to the front. Ellis suddenly stopped and said to Northern, There's someone's. Northern raised an inquisitive brow at him and looked front. Then he cautiously took his steps and peeped before revealing himself. What is she doing here? As he expressed his shock internally, he revealed himself and waved his hand to Ellis to also do the same. Both of them trekked to the front of the mansion where someones were standing opposite each other, armed and ready to go at each other. Only one of them wasn't, thiefy with fiery vermilion hair. Annette turned her head to see Northern. Immediately she let out a sigh and slapped her face. Master, what is going on right now? The brown-skinned lady beside her asked. She was standing with her hands fisted in front of her face. Metallic gauntlets of no really impressive design adorned her fists. Immediately Northern laid his eyes on her. Even he couldn't resist what they provoke in every man. She had a big stature, not anything concerning, but it made her womanly features to be quite prominent, especially when she was dressed like that. Tight tank top and jean shorts that revealed too much of her thighs. Although the jeans seemed to have lost their qualification to even be called jeans. But that was beside the matter. The point was, damn, her thighs. Northern found himself gawking for a moment, before Annette interfered. Caught you staring at my student. Immediately, the dark lady threw her face back at Northern, with a scowl etched upon her face. But immediately she returned her eyes to the front, her scowl just now crumbling to a puzzled expression. In front of her were two, perhaps beings. One was a beast she had seen. The other was a young man, an exact copy of the one standing behind them but in a different armor. "Master, is he a twin?" Annette looked at the lady beside her. Noticing her confused frown, she leaked a small smile and replied, "No, he's not. That's his talent ability, I presume." Annette shifted her gaze to Northern. "But everyone is saying he's a tamer, which really makes him a gem already. Are you saying he has two talent abilities?" Annette scratched her head. "See, I don't even know myself. This guy is the one thing that doesn't seem to make any sense." Northern came closer and stole a glance at her thighs. They were thick and brown, with the reflection of the sun falling on her form. Her skin was glowing, and her thighs too. "What the heck are you gawking at?" she snarled at Northern. Immediately he retracted his eyes and shifted them to Annette, then cleared his throat. "Ahem, instructor, and what brings you here?" "Well, I just wanted to check up on you." "So," Northern interrupted, "and you brought along your student?" Northern gave a stern look at the lady, then returned his eyes to Annette, frowning. "I don't think so. What do you want, instructor Anne?" "What? Can't an instructor come say hello to her favorite student?" "Drop it. I wasn't even your student. You just conducted my exam for a day, and that's it." Annette frowned for a fraction of a second, then sighed, touching her chest, her face dubiously contorting into a sorrowful front. "Oh, seriously, North boy, you are a very bad boy. Do you know how worried this instructor was about you when you were not around?" She moved her finger to wipe a tear off her eyes. "Mean. North boy, you are so mean." Immediately the brown-skinned lady, Vida, turned and frowned at him. Northern exhaled. Now he had been caught in a bind, Annette's deceptive bind. With the way the lady was glaring at him, she's probably going to think he's just being cruel. Ellis was there too. He didn't want the guy to start having ideas in his head. But the truth was he and Annette weren't that close. Indeed, he did feel relieved when he saw her, but it didn't count as anything. He had been alone for months. Finally he comes back to the outside world to meet someone that was maybe nice to him in the past, not to forget, in a crowd of many unfamiliar people. That didn't necessarily mean they were close before, or she deserved any special attention from him. It also didn't mean she had any privilege to come to his house unannounced. Besides, they weren't that close, but he could guess enough of her character. This drunkard wouldn't come here to just check up on him. "I bet she needs something." Northern's voice invaded the silence. "I know you want something from me. How about you just drop the act and say what you want? Speaking to my master like that is disrespectful." Vida snarled at him with a furious glare. She looked like she could rip anything to shreds with the scowl on her gray eyes. But Northern ignored her and turned to Annette. "What is it?" Annette heaved a sigh and intoned, "Seriously, you brat. What world did you live in to be suspicious of everyone around you? Listen, I sincerely came here to see how you are doing. While doing that, I wanted you to spar with my student. Her name is Vida." Northern looked at her, then looked at her student, not sparing a glance at her thighs this time around before his gaze went back to Annette. "So, in a word, you also came here to gauge my abilities. You wanted to see what I'm capable of?" A frown settled tensely on Annette's brow. "What nonsense is that? I told you I came here to make her train with you. To be particular, I wanted 3 of us to work together and clean up the forest since it's teeming with monsters. I thought you might need some help, and it's a good opportunity for her to grow." Her frown slowly dissipated, then she added, "I don't even know what to feel right now. There's the shock of finding a pile of burnt bodies around. There's this, you being suspicious of me. I know we weren't close in the past, but for 6 good months in this realm, I was the only person that cared about your existence in all the people that knew you. This feels wrong to me." Northern was silent for a couple of seconds. "Did I make a mistake? But there's no reason. She doesn't even know me. Why will she care about helping me to clear the forest? What if she got hurt in the process? Then she'd be resenting me. Or at the end she'd expect that I give her the soul cores or some sort of reward." Northern sighed. "I really do not understand you guys. He might have been someone who gave everything because of love in his past life. It didn't mean he was someone who would do it any time to random people at the expense of his own well-being." Northern used to be a somewhat meticulous and logical person, although that logic was rendered useless when he fell in love. And then he got played. Maybe subconsciously, Northern had already stopped seeing the genuineness in human actions, and thus started suspecting goodwill. If that was the case, it was quite understandable why he saw Raven's plan to be insane and unreasonable. But did this make him better as a human? Or worse? Was he advancing or receding? Chapter 153. A Promise of Fear-Facing. Currently in front of the mansion, 5 humans and 1 white beast stood sparsely. Northern's clone and Mr. Fluffy still facing Vida and Annette. Although the brown-skinned lady now had most of her guard down, she was still amazingly composed even though she looked to be standing casually. Northern folded his arms and let out a tired sigh before cutting the silence with his voice. So, let's say you came to clear out the forest. What do we do now? It's all cleared out. Annette's eyes stayed on him, contemplating his entire existence for a couple of seconds. Then she gestured with both her hands as she responded. Well, I don't know. Since it's been cleared out, maybe you two can spar? If you don't want to spar, maybe we can dare something crazy. A wild glint appeared in her eyes. What crazy something is there for you to dare? Northern asked, raising an inquisitive brow at her. The wild glint in her eyes grew, exploding into a feral flame. What else? We burst into that mansion and take down the apex-level corpse eater. For a moment she looked like a vicious beast. Oh, that. Northern went silent for a second. I guess there's no issue with hunting that. The problem is, that thing holds my precious talent fragments. I want to know how many talent fragments I'll receive from killing a savage rank, apex-level monster. He looked back, gazing at the entrance of the castle. I don't think its soul core would be worth much. It's only a savage rank. But I also don't know if its soul core is worth much. I don't know what I'll be losing. Northern returned his eyes to Annette and after a calm breathing, he opened his mouth. Instructor, and the monster in that mansion is very, very dangerous. The fact that it's alive should already tell you so. Annette looked at the mansion and looked at Northern. No doubt it is, but with this much? In the end, it's only savage rank. Northern nodded his head. Indeed, we probably could pull it off, but that can't be now. Why? Annette asked. I'm going on an expedition with Raven. Annette's eyes widened. Oh me, oh my. Her brows drifted upward and her eyes blazed seductively at him, contorting her lips with a coquettish grin. You guys are already so close? Something about her expression made Northern immediately sneer at her. No. There's nothing of such. Don't look at me like that. Ah, you sharp boy. Shooting shots when it has not even been a week since you came here. I said it's not like that. Northern frowned deeply at her. I've heard you. No need to get all worked up if it truly isn't. She waved her hand as if dismissing his defense. Instructor Annette, I wanted to ask. Annette's expression straightened as she noted the seriousness in Northern's tone. What? How long was I out for before waking up? Oh, she gestured with 3 fingers. 3. You were out for 3 days. And I guess today should be your 2nd day of waking up. And yet it feels like I've been through so much. He turned his head back, taking a look at Ellis before returning his gaze to Annette. I promise to help with the monster when I come back. I need whatever strength I can keep for whatever that girl is planning. I'm not really comfortable going with her as it is. Going after fighting a monster of this sort will be very careless of me. They were pure lies. Northern of course knew he could deal with the monster and come out unscathed. But he was also very aware that none of them knew that. If he truly would be helping them, he'd need to pretend or at best have his clone do the work while hiding somewhere. That is, if he wanted to pretend. Now, he wasn't so sure which would be harder, actual fighting as a weak drifter or pretending to be a weak drifter. But the bottom line was, I don't want them to have it. Maybe when I come back I can overlook it and give it to them. Annette stood akimbo, threw her head at Vida and blinked, then she looked back at Northern. How about we change the deal if you want to do it by that time? A small frown creased on Northern's head. You want to make changes? What changes will that be? If you want to help when you come back from where you are going with Raven, I'm sure by then you'd be stronger, so instead of fighting this one monster, follow us into a rift. Immediately Northern heard the word rift. He instinctively pulled a step back and revealed a grim frown. What? Are you insane? Why would I follow you into a rift? He snarled. Annette looked squarely at him. Calm down, Northern. I know the last rift was a trauma for you. It was a tier V, and look at you, you came out alone as at that. You are a drifter now. Going into rifts is a norm for every drifter. Besides, you won't be going alone. Northern breathed for a couple of seconds and sighed. He closed his eyes and opened them before speaking. I'm sorry. I understand what you mean, instructor, and I reacted without even thinking, but she's right. I can't be dreading the thought of going into rifts just because of what I went through in my first rift. Eventually, I have to face my fears so my fears don't make a face out of me. Northern allowed a soft smile that graced his pale features with a sublime beauty and said, Thank you, instructor, and what you said is indeed correct. I promise to go into a rift with you when I come back from my expedition with Raven. Annette smiled back. It's good that he managed to compose himself quickly. I thought he would be a wuss. You have to survive first, though. Raven is a monster. If she came to personally meet you, then something ugly is going on in her mind. Although I don't think she'd put your life in danger. In fact, she'd sacrifice hers to keep yours. But still, be careful. She concluded and walked away. Let's go, Vita. The brown-skinned lady threw one fierce glare at Northern and quickly followed her master. Watching their backs disappear into the forest, Northern exhaled, then turned to the entrance of the mansion, saying to Ellis, Let's go inside, as he trekked. Chapter 154. Business of the Day, Part 1. Northern and Ellis sat opposite each other. Northern was seated on the bed while Ellis sat on the chair, legs shaking severely. What's wrong? Northern inquired with a frown. Nothing, he shrieked. Northern let out a sigh and scratched the back of his head for a moment. Then he spoke in a tired tone. I told you, didn't I? I said I live with a monster. Ellis shivered, almost flying out of his own skin. Although Ellis had not seen the monster, the moment he got within the perimeter that his attribute sense could work, he started shivering. Because his perception was incredibly precise, he could accurately measure the level of danger the monster posed to him, and realized that Northern wasn't exaggerating when he said he lived with an apex-level monster. Sick. This is sick. It makes absolutely no sense, Ellis thought to himself. He had seen all sorts before coming to the Dark Continent, most especially because he was a guy that wasn't too far from a plebeian. He had seen shades of people look down on him. He had seen the ones that were amazing, the ones that were outstanding, the ones that were outright pompous, the ones that were strong. All of them before his eyes never defied common sense like this. All of them never made him shake with so much fear. They never made him shrink to this rate. At this point, his honor didn't matter. His goal didn't matter. He just wanted to free himself from whoever this man was. He didn't want to have anything to do with this monster. But at the same time, he couldn't deny the logic that told him that this same man is probably the only one that could help him. He wouldn't owe him. He'd play his part in this contract, and maybe, just maybe, if he hung around this man, he could find a way out of this place. It was scary to raise his hopes like that, but it was a gut feeling Ellis couldn't get rid of. And one thing that characterized guys like him who had talents that built up around perception was gut feelings. Northern stared at the aloof boy for a couple of seconds. By now he understood that no explanation of this situation could make sense to Ellis. The boy is probably shocked out of his pants and couldn't make sense of the situation. Moreover, they passed through and the monster did not even come out once while it clearly sensed their presence. That part was good. I thought it'd act crazy since I was with another person. Northern was already prepared to reveal some extent of his abilities to protect Ellis if the need be. Because Ellis right now is a precious person. Thank goodness it all worked out well. Northern opened the strap bag beside him and glanced at Mr. Fluffy, who was calmly seated at the corner of the room. Immediately Northern looked at him, His ears shot up and head rose. Unfortunately, Northern just wanted to confirm if the beast was all good and had turned his eyes away. Ellis also glanced at the beast and looked at Northern. After gulping like 1,000 times, Ellis finally opened his mouth, speaking slowly. I wanted to ask. Northern, who was busy dipping his hand into the bag, paused for a moment and looked at him. What? Is it really okay, staying with a monster? A frown graced Northern's brow. So, would you have me throw him out? Where that abomination will eat him up? Ellis immediately shook his head another 1,000 times. No, 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 no. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't mean it that way. Northern leaned his head forward, snarling at the poor boy. Then what way do you mean it? Ellis shuddered again and defeatedly lowered his head, causing Northern to retract his head. As he was about to continue, Ellis's voice sailed into his ears. Then why is the monster not coming here and killing us? If it's so dangerous, why is it not here? He mustered shakily a glare to Northern's face. His forced facial composure showed that he demanded answers, even though he was a typical wuss. Northern met his eyes in silence for a while and then curved a corner of his lips. Guess why? Ellis raised a brow. He looked left and looked right. Because of dark terror? Northern smiled a bit. Yeah, I guess you could call it that. Ellis froze. What is with that reaction? Something about the way Northern's reaction to his answer was offsetting. It was not enough. Ellis narrowed his eyes at Northern and asked, Then why isn't it dead? I'm sure dark terror is more than able to kill it. You're sure? How can you be so sure? Ellis frowned, thinking for a moment. Then he decided to just say it as it is. I saw its strength. A devil-level, Hellion rank monster. I'm sure it is the strongest monster in this place. Northern smiled a little and looked at Ellis intensely. So Ellis, do you think a devil-level, Hellion rank can defeat an apex-level, savage rank? Ellis was immediately thrown into a bind by Northern's question. He opened his mouth to talk but closed them before any words could fly out. While it seemed like the answer was certain, a Hellion rank was 2 ranks stronger than the savage rank. But the problem was the savage rank is an apex danger level. That fact alone annulled all common sense. The apex danger level of any rank stood at a point where common sense could be defied, and a deviant far stronger than any could be born. It was impossible to predict how an apex level would do with any other rank of monsters, because it was simply the apex of that rank. Northern might not have known this, but Ellis was well aware, which was what made Northern's question difficult to answer. Northern waved away his hand dismissively. Forget all that. Let's get into the business of the day. I'll assign the items to you now. Chapter 155. Business of the Day, Part 2. Ellis stared hazily at Northern as he continued to bring out different items and place them into his hands. He watched silently as the items bounded to his soul and became a part of him. So many. How come? Ellis wondered, even as Northern continued to hand him all the items. When he was finally done, Northern raised his head and looked at Ellis. That pretty much sums it all up. Ellis nodded and Northern continued. What I want you to do is sell these items for me. I want them to be sold for soul cores. And I want to believe that you have an eye for things. You should know how much these items are worth. If you'll be exchanging them, you better not exchange them for inferior items. Northern glared at him. And don't you ever think of cheating me. Ellis gulped and smiled bitterly. Trust me, sir. I am more than committed to making sure that you get the best of these items. I have seen more than enough to be sensible about this. Northern's eyes stayed on him for a couple of seconds. All right, I'll trust you on that. Regarding taking care of your problem, stay here for a while with me. Should there be any changes in my plans, I'll tell you about it. But for now, it's safe to be here. Ellis raised a brow. Safe? Yes, safe. What do you think it's not? There's an apex-level monster in your basement. I told you it's a neighbor, and I have nothing against him. I met him here, he's been dwelling here before I came. Wouldn't it be unfair to the monster if I just swooped in, killed it and took its house? Northern shook his head. No, not at all, it makes no sense. Right? A contradicting frown strained Ellis's brows, as if they were being pulled against their will. What? You have nothing against him? You met him here? What nonsense is this guy saying? Northern's words once again were blatant and absolute nonsense to Ellis. He couldn't make sense of how a drifter could utter such words. Why is he speaking like monsters are humans? The way Northern spoke and addressed the monster was as if he was relating to a fellow being, as if it had rights. Which was strange because these were monsters that would throw their jagged teeth at any flesh without a thought. In order to save themselves, it was only plausible that humans strike them down, effectively and as fast as they could. Northern talking about this monster like it was human was just very, very amusing and yet scary. I am amused at him, and yet I am so scared. He was so scared he couldn't dare to go against Northern in any way. In fact, at this point he didn't know who he was more scared of. That man or this man. Northern nodded and then laid his back flat on the bed.
Dam, I'm hungry.
If you don't mind, I have some roasted meat from the last meal we had in the morning. I've not been able to eat because it's been a lot from that time till now, Ellis said. Right, indeed it has. I have just woken up a day, but I feel like I've been awake for like a month. He propped himself up in a spring. Speaking about roasted meat, I should have some of that. He faced Mr. Fluffy. Right, Mr. Fluffy. Remember our first meeting? The beast raised its head and let a growl creep out of its large mouth. Ellis watched both of them. At this point, his eyes were just blank with surprise. Man, I don't even know anymore. He felt like if he continued to think about how weird this is and how scary and nonsensical everything Northern is, he'd just run mad before returning to his parents. No, not yet. I can't run mad yet. I have to go back to the Central Plain. And he might have found a person that could guarantee that for him. Ellis watched Northern carry his strap bag and suddenly turn it over. In the next couple of seconds, a flood of shock like Ellis had never experienced hit him. Northern first tried dipping his hand into the bag but couldn't find anything. He had tried it earlier when he remembered about the meat. He actually wondered if it'd be okay or if it'd be spoiled. But when he was talking to Ellis, he sort of got carried away and remembered now. Darn. There are too many soul cores in there. Northern frustratingly turned the whole bag, shaking it. Soul cores began to pour out of the bag like rain from the clouds, creating a cluster of hard sounds as they fell and rolled on the wooden floor. For a while, Northern was shaking the bag and soul cores were pouring out of it endlessly. This caused Ellis to freeze with a slightly open mouth. Just when he thought he had seen it finish. Just when he thought he couldn't be more shocked and surprised by Northern's actions anymore. This happened. Northern looked at Ellis with a frown, not minding for a second the rain of soul cores that were pouring. What? Ellis threw his head back and slapped his face hard with his palm. Darn it. Seriously, darn it all. What the hell have I gotten myself into? Northern looked at him uninterestedly. I probably remember you making the same statement a while ago. What's up with that? Haven't you seen soul cores before? Ellis's brow creased with a tense and strained frown.
Seriously, man, seriously.
What the hell are you? He shouted. Chapter 156. Finally. Swish. Northern swept forward, trailing a linear streak of blue light. His sword cleaving into the Resolve's thick skin with ease, splitting it as he swept across in that instance. You have slain a hazardous savage monster. Phrygian, you have gained +2 talent fragments. As he reached the other side, he twirled his sword and swung it away, but before the crimson blood on it could splash off, it was absorbed by the sword. Northern looked at his dominant hand. Wow, so this was how it worked. He could feel himself being rejuvenated with strength even though he had barely expended any to take care of these monsters. The order Blood Reaver was only effective when the blood of the target, whether human or monster, slain by Northern was crimson. Northern had at first thought that it'd only be useful killing humans, but just as he had seen now and observed before, there are different blood types and they all depend on the internal composition of the monster. Although so far so good, Northern had only seen crimson and black. Another Phrygian thrashed towards him in a frenzied attack. Without losing his cool, in fact, he acted like he already saw the monster coming before it even moved. Northern gently raised his hand, placing his sword in a diagonal position where the monster itself just flew into its tip and killed itself. You have slain a hazardous savage monster. Phrygian, you have gained +2 talent fragments. Still, I'm disappointed in this. Just 2. Northern didn't even know where to begin. He did observe that during his wars while being insane his talent fragments did not accumulate much. Well, they did rise, but if he slayed monsters the way he thought he did, he felt he should have crossed over 1,000 fragments a long time ago. Except if Ul was interfering or the talent fragments gained were just too little, it could also be that he wasn't killing. Northern was not sure of himself in an insane state. Did he make sure the monsters died or did he just slash them and move to the next? It happened a lot in wars, no one really has the time to be checking the dead. The point was to just deal enough damage in one go such that your enemy would not be able to move again. TSK. Northern clicked his teeth as a holographic panel appeared before his eyes and followed him in front as he walked forward. Name, Northern Longguard. True name, nameless. Attributes, formless, spawn of void, limitless void, vestige of chaos and void. All eyes, chaos thread, flames of chaos. Soul rank, drifter. Talent fragments, 142/2000. Copied talents, 0/2. Own talents, 1. Attribute abilities, active/passive. September 10th. Owned items, Mortal Blade, Eternal Twilight, Silver Sword, Death Glare, and 3 others. I guess I have what I need to copy that darn skill. After copying it, I'll grind hard and move to the next rank. Then for a while my growth will have to stay stagnant so I can invest all the talent fragments in whatever talents I've managed to copy by then. Evolve them all to the next level. Most especially that Soul Eyes. I'm looking forward to how it would be when I evolve it. Northern breathed in and out as if he was immersed in a large pool of satisfaction. The way things were going was pretty okay. But he had a feeling things were not going to be that way for long. Especially since Raven had not even come to see him. I wonder what's wrong? Should I go to the city? He shook his head vehemently. No, that'll make me look desperate. First, I should return home and copy that talent. Then I'm going to come back and find whatever monsters are left in this place. I'll hunt them all. Northern stepped forward but stopped and looked back. The place he was standing amidst was filled with stalls and carts. Although they were all thrashed, weeds of brown hue growing over them. There were holes here and there in different buildings. Monsters had infested every corner, but today, Northern had managed to cleanse this marketplace. They were not much. I should go to the other part of the city. There should be a lot of monsters there. Since instructor and said they were only able to take back a part of the city. Northern wondered for a second why they didn't bother to slay the rest, but he immediately answered the question. The people would probably get complacent and become difficult to lead. There needs to be some sort of danger and order keeping people away from that danger. This was the only way Gilbert and the students could be respected and followed. People would undoubtedly regard them as heroes. Or I could be wrong. Maybe they've just been busy. Northern tried not to project his thoughts on them, despite thinking fairly and squarely. He leaped into the air. The feet of the night terror were like a spring, shooting him into the air. After a couple of jumps on building rooftops, Northern was back on the rooftop of his own mansion. Well, not legally, but given the situation. He slipped in through the broken window of the room, causing Ellis to jump up in a flare. The boy looked like he wanted to jump out of his skin, panting heavily as Northern entered the small cove and placed his strap bag on the table. The devilish armor slowly dissipated, leaving the eternal twilight. He took the eternal twilight to be more like his clothes and night terror his armor. Hey Ellis! Northern called out as he sat on the chair. Mr. Fluffy slowly walked to his side and sat down beside his leg. Sir, Ellis answered. I have a favor to ask. Ah? Ellis sheepishly scratched his head and laughed. A favor? Haha, what can I possibly do for you, sir? I have a feeling that this would be more of an impossible thing to do. Darn it, was I right to believe him? Bet he's going to make me do something hard. Can you look at Mr. Fluffy with your soul eyes? Ellis raised his brows. Sir, look at Mr. Fluffy with your soul eyes. I want to know what you see. Okay. Ellis looked at Northern carefully before he turned his gaze to the beast, who seemed to be waiting anxiously, with erect ears and vibrant eyes. Northern carefully watched as Ellis stared at the wolfish beast. Do you want to copy Talent Soul Eyes, C-Class? Yes. Talent Soul Eyes has been copied. 100 talent fragments have been deducted. Finally, Chapter 157, Jackpot. Do you want to copy Talent Soul Eyes, C-Class? Yes. Talent Soul Eyes has been copied. 100 talent fragments have been deducted. Finally, Northern beamed brightly, a big smile gracing his lips. At this point, he wasn't even paying attention to whatever Ellis was saying. He immediately summoned up his panel. Name, Northern Longguard. True name, nameless. Attributes, formless, spawn of void, limitless void, vestige of chaos and void. All eyes, chaos thread, flames of chaos. Soul rank, drifter. Talent fragments, 42/2000. Copied talents, 1/2. Own talents, 1. Attribute abilities, active/passive. September 10th. Owned items, Mortal Blade, Eternal Twilight, Silver Sword, Death Glare, and 3 others. Then, talent, Soul Eyes. Class, C. Talent, true. Name, The Blind Song. Description. There was a time, darkness filled the world and beautiful music of ambiguity resonated in all 8 realms. It brought peace and tranquility to all that heard it and revealed the darkest of hearts. Deepest of depths became shallow. All that were hidden was revealed. Talent ability. C. Attributes. Sense. Talent progression. 0 out of 100. From the description alone, Northern felt like he was going to go brain dead. What is it with this complicated description? He looked at Ellis, who was frowning at him. Right now, Ellis's frown didn't matter. Northern was just wondering, does this guy even know about this complicated description? Ellis. What? Did you finally decide to pay attention to me? Ellis was almost pouting. No, I want to ask. Do you have a true name? Ellis's eyes widened for a moment, but he quickly composed himself and looked away. No. You're lying. Northern raised a corner of his lips and said further, Don't worry. I am someone you can trust. You don't have to lie to me. Ellis slowly turned his head to Northern with a slight frown coming on his forehead. Suddenly and strangely, his parents' words rang in his head. Ellis, until you find someone you can trust, never show anyone what you can do. Something about Northern tempted him to want to trust him. Besides, Northern had managed to find out about his ability. Maybe telling him is not a bad idea. Ellis swallowed his spit. With a hint of hesitation, he slowly opened his mouth. Yes, I have a true name, and it's called The Blind Song. Northern smiled for a moment. I see. What does it mean? Ellis shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. Maybe a song for the blind, or it's the title of a song. I don't know. People say a true name's real power is brought out when the true meaning is realized. I tried studying about it so I could be a part of the very few that has unlocked the power of their true name, but it was to no avail. I have never even seen it in any book. Northern raised his head. With what Ellis said, one thing was clear. He doesn't have the description. So, this is a thing only I am capable of. Northern felt like his internal organs wanted to start dancing. Happiness toiled inside of him. This means that only he is capable of seeing such a description on true names. If this was the case, then plainly, Northern was closer than any of the drifters to unlocking the essence of their true name. And not to say, he is part of the very few that have managed to unlock the power of their true name. Yes, Nameless gave him the power to take away people's names and grow his attributes. although Northern did hope he doesn't have to use the ability at all. But he doubted that. Humans will always screw up, no matter what. He looked at Ellis and said, "Don't worry, your secret is safe with me. I have no intention to tell anyone about your true name." "What about you? Do you have a true name?" Northern smiled. "I'm nameless." "I see." Ellis nodded. Northern raised a brow. "What's with that look on his face? I just told him my name, didn't I? Anyway, let's test this." He raised his head and internally activated the ability. A holographic panel suddenly appeared in front of Northern's eyes, floating beside Ellis with a line traced to his head. Northern's mouth fell agape. He had to retract his head and clean his eyes to see well. "Is something wrong?" Ellis asked with a frown. "No, everything is fine. Am I supposed to be able to see it like this?" Truth was, no, Ellis didn't see it in words. He automatically had the information registered in his head. But Northern was of a different breed after all. Name, Ellis Ruthsworn. True name, The Blind Song. Attributes, sense. Soul rank, drifter. Soul core saturation, low. Talent, soul eyes. Talent class, C. Talent ability, C. Northern raised a finger. "Give me a minute," he intoned and slowly stood up. He climbed the window and onto the roof. Then he sighed. A fraction of a second later, a wide grin crept eerily up his face. Northern's eyes sparkled with so much joy. He threw his hands in the air, jumped, shouting, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." He slipped down the roof while jumping and rolled down, falling down from the roof of a 40-feet building, because he was happy. When Ellis heard the loud thud, he quickly went to the window only to see Northern standing up like nothing was wrong. It made him think, "What the hell is this guy?" With a frown creasing his brow. He probably was never going to get tired of asking that question. Northern continued to jump around, throwing his hands and legs like he had hit the jackpot. Actually, he really had hit the jackpot with this ability. Crap! I didn't know it was so amazing. Finally, he stood still and looked up at the sky, looking to his left and right. "This is so great, man. So great. It changes everything for me." What could Northern have seen to make him so happy that he tripped from the roof of a 40-foot building? Chapter 158. About Soul Core's absorption. This is big. Very big. Even though he had managed to calm himself, he still couldn't contain the flood of joy that welled up inside him. Ellis's ability had turned out to be even more impressive than he thought. And why was that? It was quite simple. Northern's main ability was talent copying. But it had restrictions. There were limited slots for the talents he could copy at a particular rank. Somehow, it was impossible for him to choose what talent he wanted to copy. Talents were copied when they were activated in front of him. Of course, he could decide not to copy them despite having the required amount of talent fragments, but the real issue was there was no way he could see the information of these talents until he copied them. However, with Ellis's ability, if he used it on anyone, he'd be able to see their profile, see their true name, talent, attribute, and talent ability. It might not be much, but that means that Northern, as compared to before, now had an option of choosing what talent ability to copy. And that, to him, was a big difference. Coincidence had caused him to copy his father's talent. Several other times, he had often thought about how it would be if he copied another person's talent instead of his father's. A stronger talent. But there was no use dwelling on it. Besides, having that advanced cloning had made a lot of things easier for him and made him stronger than expected thus far. For example, Dark Terror. Not to say, there seemed to be more chances of having more singularity monsters unconditionally loyal to him and obey him. The prospects it offered were nice, even though that was just a coincidence. Ellis's too was a coincidence. A sweet smile graced Northern's lips. "Thank you for your work thus far. From now on, I'll take the reins." From this moment, Northern now had full control on what talent to copy. He exhaled and looked up. "Man, I should treat that guy to a nice meal or get him something." Northern nodded his head. He crouched, placing a tensile force on his lower legs and released himself, shooting upward like a fired bullet. Then he directed the trajectory mid-air and curved into the window, landing inside with finesse. "Hey, Ellis." Ellis, who was trying to figure out a decaying book on the table, shivered away in shock, almost falling off the chair. Darn it! What was that crazy sudden entrance? Even though sense always worked, he didn't even know Northern had entered. The boy was swifter than his sense could keep up, or perhaps there was just some other trick to it. Ellis scratched his head and slowly recomposed himself on the chair. "I hope I don't have a heart attack before leaving this continent." He craned his neck at Northern, who was staring vibrantly, waiting for a response. "You called me, sir." Northern nodded with a smile. The smile was offsetting for Ellis. It made him uncomfortable. "What is it again? I can't tell a thing that is going on in his head," Ellis complained internally. Northern, after Ellis spoke, immediately brought out a couple of soul cores and poured them before Ellis. "These are for you." Ellis raised a brow. He looked at the cores and looked at Northern again. "You are giving me these?" Northern nodded. "Yes," he added. "Absorb them and let's go to the castle. Or do you want to do it when we come back?"
No, no.
"I'd rather do it now. But what are we going to do in the castle?" Northern slightly puckered his brows. "What do you mean? Are you not going to make inquiries and try to see what you can do about the items I gave you?" "Ah, yes, but can't we wait for things to calm down? It has only been 3 days. 3 days is a lot of time for things to settle," Northern replied, his tone hushed and firm. Ellis silently observed Northern's face that was fixated on his eyes. Both of them stared at each other for a while. Then Ellis's eyes glided down to the soul cores scattered at his feet. Some had rolled under the table. "Are you sure you want to give me this?" Northern folded his arms. "Do you want me to have it back?" No, not at all. I was just, sorry, I'll just absorb them now." Ellis looked away in a slight flush of embarrassment and sat on the hardwood floor. He managed to bring all the soul cores together and crossed his legs, then placed them within his crossed legs. He took one, placed it on his right hand, allowing it to sit comfortably on his palm. Then he placed his index finger at the top, his thumb towards the side of the orb, and began to breathe. Northern watched as Ellis absorbed the cores with a bit of jealousy etched across his features. "He sure looks cool," he sneered internally. In less than 3 minutes, the soul core became transparent like glass with cracks running over it. At this point, it's just an ordinary orb that can be used as raw material for glass of low-class ornamental designs. Northern watched Ellis repeat the same thing for the other 9 cores. When he was done, he smiled and stood up. "I can feel the changes slowly." Ellis clenched his fist. Northern squinted his eyes. "Let's see." He activated C again. Name, Ellis Ruthsworn. True name, The Blind Song. Attributes, sense. Soul rank, drifter. Soul core saturation, low. Talent, soul eyes. Talent class, C. Talent ability, C. Northern knitted his brows in slight confusion. What? No changes at all. Northern felt the soul core saturation part was where it indicated Ellis's soul core growth. Perhaps it'd eventually go from low to mid, then to high, and maybe break into the next rank. After 10 soul cores, he had at least hoped to see some kind of changes. But there was none. It wasn't like the progression was recorded in numbers like his. But still, Northern was curious. He looked at Ellis in the eyes and asked, "How many soul cores have you absorbed so far?" Ellis arched his brow, lingered for a couple of seconds before responding. "If I'd count the central plane and here, I'd say a little over 100 soul cores." "I see." Northern paused for a second and asked again, "And how many more would you need to advance to the next rank?" Ellis's eyes widened a little. He was shocked by Northern's questions, and his hopes were slowly rising. "Does he want to give me more?" "I guess around 900 more, since it takes 1,000 soul cores to go into the next level. But it also depends on the monster rank of the soul cores. The higher the rank, the more essence they contain. So for higher rank monster soul cores, it'd probably not be as much. Northern nodded. I see. He looked at Ellis again. So how many did you take to become a drifter? Ellis tensed his forehead in a faint frown of confusion. You're asking a weird question. It's impossible to absorb soul cores while being a walker. The best most people like the elite clans and nobles do is educate their children and teach them all sorts, which requires a lot of money. But it's not wasted, since a walker can only advance to the next rank when they successfully come out of a rift. Ellis, after explaining, looked at Northern's focused eyes. Unlike Northern, he received a lot of classes on rifts before becoming a walker even, although his education in that regard is still inferior to many. But he was far better than Northern. Looking at Northern's face, Ellis felt the irresistible urge to continue, since Northern seemed so interested in what he was saying. Generally, the fast way to grow is by entering rifts, compared to killing monsters. When a rift is cleared, when the soul core is broken, the rift essence is shared into two. Half is poured into the soul of the person that strikes the soul core, the other half is shared among other drifters in the rift. It's simple and straightforward. No absorption technique is needed. It just automatically pours into the soul. Which is why several drifters prefer entering rifts in order to grow. When Ellis was done, he saw that Northern's eyes were glued to him. I feel good. He paid attention throughout. Now, where are my soul cores? Northern nodded his head as all the information settled in and formed a more fundamental understanding of a lot of things. I can't believe I didn't know this much and entered the rift. Wait, since I cleared the rift myself, shouldn't all the essence be poured in me? Or since I don't have a soul core, it doesn't work like that? Northern wondered for a short while and shoved the thought to the back of his mind for now. He stood up. Come on, Ellis. Let's go to the castle now. Ellis arched a brow slowly, looking at Northern. No soul cores. Chapter 159. How the Short Giant. Ellis and Northern walked freely towards the castle gate. They were very close to the gate when Ellis stopped. Ah, that's right. There's someone I wanted you to meet. Northern paused and looked at him. Who? When it comes to item dealings, he's still the best. He's a traveler. He often goes to Sloria for sales purposes and also helps the party leaders and Sage Gilbert to procure whatever they need. Compared to random people, he has good and useful stuff. Northern nodded his head minutely and then shrugged. Okay then, since you insist that this person is good, I can't say otherwise. Let's go see him, he said to Ellis. All right, okay. Ellis responded but stood still. Northern observed the boy with squinted eyes. He lingered for a few seconds and saw that Ellis was really reluctant to go. Then he asked, What's wrong? Have you been in some trouble with this one too? Ellis fidgeted a little and hiccuped. It's not like I am in trouble with him. He just really intimidates me, he replied with a sour expression. Northern raised his chin and observed the boy again. Then he shook his head with a small scoff. I don't understand why you'll be intimidated by anyone. Ellis managed to crease out a deep frown. You'll see when we get there. Northern stared at him with a downturned lips. Isn't that if you manage to take us there? With how scared you're being right now. Fine, you'll see. Ellis threw his face forward and finally put his legs to work. They didn't cross the gate. Instead, they turned left, walking in between the castle wall and the nearest tent shelters that were built in front of each other. It made the way cramped, but it was still passable. Well, the pungent and irritating odor would have to be excused. Northern as usual found that hard to deal with, even with a wrinkled nose. Crap. The situation here is even worse than it looks. People in the outskirts of the castle, it's probably reasonable to say that they were in a worse living condition than people in the castle. Although inside the castle wasn't that impressive too, Northern believed there was the blighted area and a place for the upper echelon. Where Ellis lived was probably the former because it wasn't that different from this place. Just indoors, perhaps even worse, narrow hallway, disgusting odor. At least this place was out in the open. After a while, they stopped in front of a large building. We are here. Northern raised his eyes as Ellis announced. It was a tall spire, constructed with stone, although green overgrowth had covered most of what should be of stone surface. The building was tall and slightly degraded, making it look like a relic of history, a place that was once. Northern and Ellis climbed the winding stairs, walking up to the small hill where this building sat, just behind the corner of the castle wall. It was surrounded by other decrepit buildings, although scanty, and trees stood like guardians around it. Northern couldn't help but think, this is one hell of a place. It's hard to think a nice place like this would be in the outskirts. But it was understandable, it's probably a tower that worked in one relation with the castle. I hear kingdoms have what they call towers. Looks nice. This was Northern's first time seeing one. He even does not know their function. Ellis stood in front of the wooden door, breathing in and out a couple of times. Northern, watching him from behind, shook his head. This guy is hopeless. He trudged forward and banged his knuckles on the door, knocking hard. Ellis immediately freaked out, throwing his hands to stop Northern. But with a glare, he squirmed away like a squid. Northern knocked hard one more time again and awaited a response. After a couple of minutes, there was no response. Just when he was about to knock again, tremble, everywhere started to shake. Northern immediately frowned, looked at the ground and looked around him. What is happening? The ground was shaking heavily as if some giant was walking on it. A giant! Ellis shivered. I tried to warn you not to bang his door. Northern turned his face around in a fierce scowl. Say one more thing. I'll make you regret it. Tsh, he's so annoying. Gets scared at everything. The tremor continued, jacking Northern out of his head. Now its intensity had grown, almost as if the floor was going to crack and fall any time soon. Northern stood cautiously, his eyes locked on the door, Ellis standing 5 meters behind him. The wooden door finally creaked open. At first, Northern didn't see anything but pure darkness, until his eyes glided down, and there he was. A man. A very short man, he barely even reached Northern's knees. Northern raised a brow and turned to Ellis. The poor boy bit his lips and rigorously shook his head at Northern. What the hell? The whole situation was shocking and had somehow become awkward for Northern. Ellis was there acting like he had seen a vicious monster, but before his eyes was a short man that opened the door to the castle. However, one thing was amiss. Who was causing the ground to tremble? Northern inquired internally. He raised his brow and looked down at the man that was glaring at him. Then he shook his head with a scoff. Nah, it can't be him. This one is too short to be causing such large tremors. Northern said beneath his lips and scoffed. Huh? Twerp. Who are you calling short? The short man dashed forward, causing the earth to shake heavily. He jumped into the air, reaching Northern's stomach, and threw a straight kick that caused Northern to fold like a piece of paper and immediately fly away, rolling down the hill. Ellis gulped and bowed 90 degrees. Immediately the short man's eyes turned to him. He'd be lucky if he's still alive. You seem respectful. What you here for? Ellis felt a pearl of sweat roll down his temple. I'm so relieved he didn't recognize me. Still bowing his head, Ellis responded politely. I've come to take a look at the auction. Also, I have some amazing items I'd love to exchange. Follow me. He turned around and was about to step inside when he suddenly paused and turned back. He narrowed his eyes for a moment. The next moment he widened them. Impossible! His mind cried as his eyes beheld Northern walking towards them. He might not have died, but he should have passed out? How is he walking like he's fine after receiving my earth-shattering kick? Chapter 160. Northern the Copy Ninja. The diminutive man stood speechless, his mouth slightly agape. The white-haired boy with pale skin he had kicked just moments ago was standing before him, seemingly unaffected. He retracted his head slightly. How in the world? This has never happened before. This wasn't the first time he had hit someone. His strikes packed enough power to make the earth crack, courtesy of his unique talent and attributes. He was a formidable force that no one in the vicinity dared to trifle with, not even Sage Gilbert himself. They understood his position, his strength, and his usefulness. Even if they wished to challenge him, a single punch was all it took to knock some sense into them. Although he could unleash far more than just a punch, he had always been grateful that he didn't need to, because utilizing his true strength would be devastating. Meanwhile, Northern was gazing at him with a slightly parted mouth. Well, gazing at him. This way. Name Hao Lee Redmond. True name, Little Giant. Attributes: Earthquake. Soul rank, Nomad. Soul core saturation, high. Talent, Lord of Destruction. Talent class, S. Talent ability, heavy flow, seismic waves. Wow, an S-class talent. Looks delicious. Northern licked his lips, eyeing Hao, which caused the man's brows to furrow. Bastard. How dare you look at me like I'm some meal? Crap. Did my thoughts leak? Hao's frown deepened. Did your thoughts leak? What vile thoughts you having, filthy soul? Without hesitation, Hao dashed forward, the earth crumbling with each step he took, slowing his approach. For the likes of Northern, he'd have been normally fast for Ellis. This time, Northern saw the blow coming and threw his hands up to guard his front as Hao's hand shot towards him. Wham! Even though Northern was sure he had blocked the punch, it didn't feel like it. I think I broke a bone. He might have been able to stop himself from flying away due to the force he stood with and absorbing the shock of the blow with his entire body, directing it down to his feet, something he had learned from Shin. But he was unable to protect his guarding hands from the punch. They shouldered most of the direct damage. Taking it to the stomach and flying away seemed like it would have been a better choice. Northern bit down his lips, his legs wobbled, and his hand fell lifelessly, dangling. Hao, seeing this, wore a satisfied grin. Next time, that'll teach you to respect your elders. However, a second later, Northern slowly curled up the corner of his mouth and smirked. So this is how it works. Painful. He had never taken any damage since he stepped out of the rift and became a drifter. This meant he had never witnessed the extent of some attributes, most especially Chaos Thread. Northern could feel the searing pain within his bones, as though something powerful was stitching them back together. Since he was well versed with his ability and had looked forward to seeing Chaos Thread work, he could tell immediately. A couple of seconds after the stitching, the pain slowly subsided, but it didn't disappear entirely. Behind his leather vambraces, his hand was still scathed and swollen. The difference, however, was that he could at least move his hands. He raised his hand and clenched his fist, feeling his bone throb. He released the grip and looked at Hao, who was now gazing at him with widened eyes. How can you move those hands so fast? That blow should have shattered your bones. Northern shook his hands. Oh, it did shatter my bones. The thing is, I'm not a runt you can just run over. Northern had spoken before he realized how ill-advised that statement was. Ellis face-bombed himself. Darn it! Where did this guy come from? Forget reasoning with Hao. At this point we'd be lucky if we leave here alive. Of course, Ellis knew they would. He had no doubt about that. His thoughts were merely figurative, since Hao currently looked like he wouldn't rest until he saw the end of Northern. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Lick. Seismic wave. Wham! Northern's eyes widened and glowed as a tremendous gale erupted from nowhere and shot towards him. Immediately, he shot out his hand just as Hao had done, narrowed his eyes, contracted his hands quickly, and punched into the incoming gale, softly pronouncing, Seismic wave. Wah-ha-am. A gale of equal, no, even more powerful force exploded from the air around him and collided with Hao's, causing the entire area to explode in a flush of wind. Everyone was sent reeling back. Only Northern managed to withstand the force of the explosion, stumbling just a couple of seconds back but was cut in different areas by the sharp wind. However, the slight cuts all over his body began to exude purple smoke, slowly and painfully being knitted together. What just happened? Northern's eyes were wide open. It had all happened in an instant, so he didn't even know how to arrange the events. What he knew was that he was alert. He had never been so alert before when anticipating an attack. Perhaps it was because of the damage Hao had managed to inflict on him in just a couple of minutes of meeting him, or it was because he wanted to copy Hao's skills. Maybe it was because he now had a talent that amplified his senses, but what he knew was that in that tiny moment before Hao used his talent ability, he was on edge, his spatial awareness at its peak. And this might have caused the unseeing eyes to instinctively activate. For a fraction of a second, Hao's attack slowed before his eyes, and he perceived every single thing in a world of blue threads. He could see the strings that flowed around the invisible wave, connected them to each other, and also a tiny, almost unnoticeable one tracing back to Hao. An understanding of the ability immediately dawned on him in that fraction of a second. Seismic Wave was a simple ability rooted in Hao's core, but expanded its attack force by forcing the wind to move beyond their will. It was powerful enough to compound and compress a tornado ratio of wind into a simple gale and shoot it forward, hence making it more impactful and devastating. But Northern still felt like this was not the true extent of the ability. Perhaps the man did not intend to cause so much damage. However, this much alone was enough to emulate. He didn't even need to copy the talent. In that brief moment of witnessing the ability's true essence, Northern perfectly copied it while applying more momentum by striking harder to make his more powerful. And the result? They were all thrown away from each other. Ellis and Hao were lying on the ground, struggling to get up. Between them was a smoothly disheveled ground with jagged cracks. If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.